Shinku is an elite acrobat who gets summoned by cute demihumans to win their sports competition. However, when he sees he's the only human with back-bending abilities, he uses them to rizz up the princess and clap her instead. It all begins one morning when Shinku hurriedly prepares for school to avoid keeping Becky, his friend, waiting. As soon as he steps out, he decides to impress Becky like he has free health insurance and front flips to meet her. On their way, Shinku tells Becky he's traveling to England to practice for his athletics tournament, so Becky wishes him luck. When they arrive at school, they both head inside while a strange dog spies on him nearby. Later, Shinku rushes to leave school early, so he jumps on the ledge to practice his flip, but the hiding dog dashes out with a dagger in its mouth and stabs the floor with it. Suddenly, a beam shoots into the sky, and a portal opens, causing Shinku to fall into it along with the dog. Meanwhile, in a world called on Flonyard, a girl named Milhai heads to the summoning ground to welcome Shinku as he lands in a petal which slowly unwraps while Milhai watches in amazement. Suddenly, the petal vanishes, and Shinku marvels when he spots Milhai with her dog ears and a tail. Just then, Milhai reveals that she summoned him and introduces herself as the leader of the Biscotti Republic. After thanking the dog for kidnapping the hero, Milhai thanks Shinku for showing up and asks if he'll listen to her story, but they get interrupted by some fireworks exploding in the sky. When Shinku asks if it's Christmas, Milhai explains that her country is at war with a neighboring country. Meanwhile, the armies of Gaul try to invade Milhai's castle, but are resisted violently by the Biscotti army. Eventually, when they successfully open the gates, Leo, the ruler of Gaul, orders her soldiers to take over the castle. At the same time, Milhai and Shinku hurry towards a giant fowl, but when Milhai hops on it and asks him to join her, he wonders if she's completely sane. Shortly after, the Sirikuru runs along while Milhai explains that they've been on a losing streak in the war against Gaul, so she asks Shinku to help them. But he says that they might need the Avengers instead of a mid-athlete like himself. However, Milhai tells him to quit being modest since she's aware of his powers. While the battle progresses, the Gaulet's army tries to cross a lake on their way to infiltrate Filiano Castle, but gets shot down with cannons, so Godwin, the captain of the Gaulet Knights, orders more troops to attack. However, they get intercepted by Eclair, the captain of the Biscotti Imperial Guard, who single-handedly takes on a battalion and converts them into plushies. Just when she notices some of Gaulet's soldiers escaping, she calls on Laurent, her brother, who then finishes them off. Meanwhile, Shinku watches from a distance with Milhai and asks if anyone is going to die in the battle. Milhai then explains that their battles are means of negotiating between countries, so there are rules which prevent people from getting hurt. When Milhai reveals that her people will be devastated by any more losses, Shinku grabs her hands and promises not to let them down. Shortly after, when Milhai was spotted arriving with the hero, some commentators announce that she's summoned a hero for the battle, surprising everyone. Milhai then announces that their endless losing streak is about to be stopped by the hero. Suddenly, Shinku shows up dressed in a hero's outfit and shows off a few moves while introducing himself as the hero. While the commentators hype up Shinku, Rico asks Milhai if he knows the rules of the war, but Milhai assures her that Shinku will be fine. Meanwhile, on the front lines, Shinku meets with Roland and charges towards the enemies while flashing back to the moment he got suited up. Milhai had explained that he has to defeat every enemy he comes across by either knocking them out or touching their backs. So, Shinku blazes through the battlefield playing tag with the enemies' heads. After this, the touched soldiers turned into beast balls, while the commentators couldn't believe his speed as the battle scoreboard increased in favor of the Biscottians. Meanwhile, Leo and her officials observe his movement from the screen in the sky and announce that it's time to see if he's actually worth the hype. Somewhere else on the war front, Eclair comments that the princess didn't have to summon a useless hero and tries to prove it by launching a beam attack from her swords, which takes out the enemies in their scores. But to her surprise, one of them leaps out from the smoke to attack her, but Shinku shows up and takes him out with a hero kick. After an awkward moment of introductions, Shinku commends Eclair's attack and flashes back to the moment Milhai handed him a ring known as the Heavenly Sword Palladian, which could transform into any weapon of his choice. Back then, he had summoned a staff and assured Milhai that he would be fine with just that. So Milhai explained how seal spells work and explained that he'd be able to produce spirit energy for using an ability called the Seal Cannon. Shinku then tells Eclair that the princess recommended her as the best user of seal cannons and says he'd like to learn from her. Surprised, Eclair decides to show Shinku how to use the seal cannon while he mirrors her moves. Suddenly, they both unleash an attack devastating enough to wipe out the approaching enemies in their thousands. However, Eclair warns Shinku that the seal cannon drains its user's energy and it's ineffective against armor-wearing soldiers. Just when Shinku thanks her, Eclair spots an incoming attack and quickly blocks it. However, she gets thrown off balance by the impact of a deflected arrow. Due to this, Eclair lands on Shinku while Leo arrives and tells them to get a room. When Shinku asks Eclair who she is, Eclair introduces herself as the leader of the Galette Lion army and announces that she's advancing into the fort. So she leaves, while Eclair and Shinku get tangled and bicker while trying to break free of each other. Suddenly, Shinku mistakenly presses on Eclair's sweet buttons and fondles it to confirm his discovery. Surprised, he points out that Eclair is a girl, infuriating Eclair, who then tosses him in the air. Meanwhile, Leo charges towards the fort but halts when the Biscotti archers make it rain arrows. However, Leo summons a staff to deflect the arrows and flings the staff, which then destroys the towers on which the archers stood. Moments later, she advances towards a slippery mortar-shaped trap where the Biscotti soldiers intercept the invaders. She then leaps across the trap, but in the same moment, Shinku and Eclair go after her to knock her out of flight mode. She then evades them, while they crash into each other, and blasts them out of the sky. After the rubble clears, Shinku takes his head off Eclair's pillows, and she angrily asks why he's interfering with the battle. While they blame each other, Leo activates her seal and launches a devastating attack that takes out everyone nearby except Shinku and Eclair. However, while Shinku marvels at this, Eclair points out that they don't stand a chance against Leo and suggests they run. The moment they take off, Leo activates her ultimate spell, which goes off like a nuclear explosion, leaving many as roasted beast balls. After this, she orders someone to check to see if the hero and Eclair are dead. Surprisingly, Shinku and Eclair fall from the sky and agree to work together. Suddenly, Eclair sends Shinku down with a kick, so he descends and attacks Leon, but gets discarded like good advice. However, when Eclair lands, they jointly attack Leo and crush her weapons. While Leo marvels at this, Shinku and Eclair crush her armor, leaving her barely clad. Seeing this, Leo admits defeat, and it gets announced on the broadcast. Shortly after this, the points of the Biscottians skyrocketed on the scoreboard, so they were declared victorious. Afterwards, Leo commends Shinku for landing a hit on her with Eclair's help, but tells him it won't happen again and hands him the microphone. After Shinku announces that he had fun at the battle, Leo gestures and tells him to hand over the mic to Eclair. When he tosses the mic to Eclair, Leo orders the filming crew to focus on her to get a good view. Suddenly, Eclair's clothes rip apart, exposing her mini saucers on the broadcast. Just then, she realizes she got hit by Shinku's rod during the fight and freaks out, while everyone laughs, especially Leon. Afterward, while Eclair tries to chop Shinku up with her sword, Milhai announces that they'll be holding a concert to celebrate their victory. Afterwards, Roland announces that a seat will be reserved for Shinku for his hard work, but Shinku says he should return home before then. Surprised, Roland explains that summoned heroes can neither return nor contact their world. However, on hearing this, Shinku laughs, thinking it's a joke, but freaks out when he realizes it's not. After the battle, while Laurent addresses the press, the commentators request a few words from the hero, but Laurent comments that more information about him will be revealed later. Somewhere nearby, Eclair watches Shinku sulk and figures she can't let the public see their hero like that. While the princess gets prepared for her concert, she panics and asks if anything could be done to help Shinku, but Amelita, her personal assistant, reminds her she's got more worries than her boy problems. After listing Milhai's itinerary for the rest of the day, Amelita tells her to let the scholars handle the hero's problem. Shortly after, Rico, the big brains of Biscotti, runs down a hallway, clutching books and thinking of how she intends to fix the hero's problem with little to no clues. However, since she doesn't want Milhai upset, she hurries down the hall. Meanwhile, in the town, Shinku tries to get reception on his phone, but figures he's in an alternate universe. When Eclair blames him for using a quarter of his brains before agreeing to the summoning, Shinku says he didn't agree to anything and blames the dog. Just then, the dog activates the magic circle, and when they look closer, Eclair reads out some weird writings which state that stepping on the circle means accepting the summoning. Infuriated, Shinku asks how he was supposed to read that, but Eclair tells him to chill out since the scholars are already working on sending him back. To make his stay less miserable, she hands him a bag of coins as a reward for his performance in battle and decides to orient Shinku on the basics since he's clueless. After Eclair lectures him on how funds generated from the wars are used to build the town and pay civil servants, Shinku asks if there are also real wars where people actually die. In response, Eclair explains that there have been wars like that, fought against demons. In addition to this, she explains that the townspeople are protected because of Flonyard's life force, which lies beneath the battlefields. However, outside the battlefield, people could get eaten by demons. Afterward, Eclair suggests they visit Rico to see if there's any progress yet. However, when they arrive, Rico apologizes and reveals that despite her best efforts, she hasn't discovered a way. Seeing how disturbed Rico is, Eclair tells her to chill out since Shinku is not in a hurry. Surprised by this, Shinku decides to play along, so Eclair asks him when he needs to be back home. In response, Shinku says he has to be back home in 16 days, so Rico gets excited. Just then, Shinku whips out his phone and asks Rico if she could help him get reception. Shortly after, Rico shows up with a machine that amplifies Flonyard frequencies and turns it on. So, Shinku checks his phone and gets excited when he realizes the machine works, so he calls Becky. When she picks up the call, Shinku tells her that he might not be able to receive calls since his phone has been malfunctioning. After he tells her not to worry about him, Becky suggests he inform his family about it. So, Shinku ends the call and asks Rico if he could talk to other people, but she asks if she could see his phone and take it apart to understand the design. However, when Shinku backs off, saying it will void his warranty, Rico chases him down to get it. Meanwhile, Eclair calls Ronald to inform him that Shinku made contact with his world and has decided to stay and participate in the battles. Afterwards, while preparing for the concert, Milhai thinks about Shinku's performance in battle and decides to write a letter to Leo to find out why she suddenly became the god of war. She then flashes back to when they used to hang out. Meanwhile, in Galette, Rouge, Leo's aide, asks if she'll be attending Milhai's concert, but she says it's beneath her. However, when Rouge asks if she'd like to obstruct the concert instead, Leo says she's not interested and asks about Gaul, her brother. On a hill somewhere, Gaul comments that the hero must be pretty strong if Leo lost to him, so he decides to play around with him a bit. A few moments later, while they head back to the castle, Rico suggests that Shinku get a bath in preparation for the concert. So he walks around the castle, looking for the bath and wondering where everyone went. Just then, he spots the bath and hurries in, without noticing that the bath is only open to women and is currently being used by Milhai.
I just gotta go to bed.
On entering the bath, he gets a glimpse of paradise, and when Milhai spots him too, they both freak out and apologize. While he backs off, Shinku steps into a bowl and slips into the bath, while Milhai tries to make him feel less like a fool. So Shinku decides to drown himself to avoid the embarrassment, while Milhai runs out to save the sucker. When he resurfaces, Milhai peeks through the door and asks if they could meet to talk after the concert. Shinku then agrees to meet, so Milhai leaves the bath while Shinku realizes he's in the ladies' bath. Suddenly, his ears hear Milhai scream, and after he hurriedly gets dressed to check it out, he finds Milhai abducted by some clowns from the Galette army. Coincidentally, some press guys show up on the scene and broadcast it on the sky screen. Just then, the abductors announce that they're taking Milhai away and adds that Shinku will have to duel with Gaul to save her. Suddenly, Shinku thinks with his sausage and accepts the challenge. Afterwards, the press guys have fun broadcasting the news about the kidnapping while Shinku rushes out of a building and finds Eclair running towards him. Just then, he commends her timing and announces that Milhai has been kidnapped. However, to his surprise, Eclair responds with a kick to his face, which throws him into a pillar. Annoyed by this, Shinku asks what he did wrong, and Eclair asks why he accepted a war declaration on his own. Back at the concert hall, Ronald apologizes to Amelita for not teaching Shinku about the war declaration system. He then assures her that Milhai will be rescued, but Amelita points out that the people are looking forward to the concert. So, Ronald adds that Shinku and Eclair are on their way to rescue Milhai. Suddenly, a dog shows up with a letter, surprising them both. Meanwhile, on the way to rescue Milhai, Eclair lectures Shinku that his acceptance of the challenge has plunged them into an official battle, which they're unprepared for. When she adds that they have less than an hour to rescue the princess in time for the concert, Shinku struggles to stay on his Sarakuru. Annoyed, Eclair berates him for this, so Shinku apologizes for taking up the challenge and explains that it's a serious problem when a princess is kidnapped where he's from. So he gets himself together and promises to get Milhai back just in time for the concert. As they ride off, Broish observes them from a hill nearby, so Yukikaze, her sidekick, approaches her and asks if she saw anything interesting. In response, Broish announces that a battle is about to start. At the fort in Galette, Godwin kneels before Gaul and says he's honored to be chosen for a task. So, when Gaul responds by saying he noticed Godwin hasn't fought enough, Godwin chips in that he's more proficient at field work than infiltrating forts. Hearing this, Gaul tells him to go all out against their enemies. He then asks Godwin to join him in drinking to celebrate their victory in advance. However, when Godwin asks about Milhai's whereabouts, Gaul says Rouge is taking care of her. Somewhere in the fort, While Milhai sits alone in a room, some maids walk in with a lioness and her cubs. She then informs Milhai that Gaul wants her to see the cubs, so she points out that Gaul has always treated her well while playing with the lioness and her cubs. Just then, the maid suggests she meet with him before the battle begins and leaves. Afterwards, Milhai asks the lioness if Leo is doing well since they always visited each other in the past, but now only see on the battlefield. Outside the fort, Shinku and Eclair approach Gaul's troops, and she tells him they're formidable opponents, but adds that since a legendary knight once single-handedly charged through 1,000 soldiers, they can pull it off. So, they charge towards the troops while the commander orders his archers to get ready. However, to his dismay, they get hit with artillery bombardments from the sky. While the commander wonders where the shots are coming from, Rico, who was set up somewhere in the forest, activates her seal and makes it rain brimstone on the enemies. After this, Broish observes the battle from a hill and is amused by the Biscottians' attack. Just then, Yukikaze asks why they're not joining the battle, so Broish says she'd rather sit with popcorns and watch the youngsters wipe each other out. Back at Biscotti, Ronald puts a letter on the dog and tells it to deliver the letter to Broish. At the same time, Milhai watches Shinku and Eclair fighting on a screen in her confinement. Just then, Gaul enters and apologizes for the abrupt kidnapping. After this, he requests to have a duel with a hero once and offers to talk to her about compensation later. So Milhai accepts his offer, and Gaul takes his leave. Meanwhile, outside the fort, Shinku and Eclair were boxed in by Gaul's troops, so Shinku wonders why Rico's bombardment stopped, and Eclair explains that it's expected since gunners stand no chance against the infantry. After this, Godwin announces that Shinku's presence has been requested by Gaul and promises to let Eclair go if she surrenders. However, when she refuses, Godwin picks up his weapon and prepares for a fight. So, both Shinku and Eclair try to play hero, but soon get into an argument, which infuriates Godwin, so he swings his giant ball to shut them up for good, but Shinku blocks it and gets slammed into the wall with Eclair. Godwin then approaches them while saying they don't stand a chance against him, but when he raises his axe to attack them, he gets interrupted by a spinning sword. After the sword lands, Broish shows up and apologizes for interrupting. She then comments that Eclair has grown, so Eclair screams her name. Hearing this, Godwin turns to see who it is, so Broich announces that it's her first time meeting the hero. She then introduces herself as a freelance knight of Biscotti and explains that she's offering her support as requested by Laurent. Suddenly, Shinku spots a sparkling arrow in the dark and tells Broich to watch out. Suddenly, the archers fired at her, but she activated her seal and slashed down the building with a beam from her violent blade. After the building collapses, some fireworks go off in the sky, surprising a commander who then wonders who's launching them. Immediately, many of his soldiers get turned into beast balls by Yuki. Before she could finish introducing herself, the commander attacked her, but Yuki quickly sent him flying with slashes from her knife. Just then, Rico arrives with some fireworks and cannonballs, so Yuki carries her and activates a seal, which makes her fly. When they spot the soldiers fighting on the ground, Rico suggests they give the Biscottians some air support. Suddenly, they poured out the cannonballs and activated them with their seals, so the balls exploded and took out many soldiers on the ground. Meanwhile, Eclair and Shinku rush towards the fort and inform Broich that they're going to rescue Milhai. Broich then tells them to finish the mission while she and Yuki keep the soldiers busy. Shortly after this, Shinku breaks into a building with his ride and finds Gaul waiting, but before Gaul introduces himself, Shinku charges towards him. Sensing his impatience, Gaul grabs a weapon and hops on his Serakuru. After this, they clash weapons, and Shinku says he can keep the introductions for later since he's on a clock. Somewhere in the forest, Eclair encounters the 3 clowns who kidnapped the princess and calls them idiots. Hearing this, the 3 knights introduce themselves and prepare for a fight while Eclair does the same. Back in the fort, both Shinku and Gaul manage to land a hit on each other. But while Gaul was impressed that the hero is as good as a standard knight, Shinku thinks about Milhai and says he must rescue her. Hearing this, Gaul says he'll have to go through him first. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Eclair blocks attacks from 3 opponents and realizes she's outnumbered. She then flashes back to a memory of the girls being cute at a beach, but she realizes they're nothing like that in battle. On the other hand, Shinku and Gaul continued clashing weapons until both of their weapons broke. Just then, Gaul hops off his Serakuru and comments that playtime is over. He then activates his seal and attacks Shinku, but Shinku blocks the attack and falls off his Serakuru. Unsatisfied, Gaul launches more attacks, which Shinku defends with a short half of his rod. After this, Gaul pulls off his ultimate move, thinking it's over, but to his surprise, Shinku appears out of the dust and says it's not. So, Gaul checks him out and wonders how he survived his ultimate move. Just when Gaul wonders if Shinku is a monster, Shinku bleeds from his head, so Gaul freaks out and asks if visitors from the other world don't turn into beast balls. After this, he suggests that Shinku take a break, but Shinku snaps out of it and says he's fine. Suddenly, he activates his seal and announces that he has to save the princess in time for the concert. Shocked to hear this, Gaul blocks his attack and asks what he means by a concert. Outside the fort, while Broish and Godwin face off, Yuki informs Broish that the enemy reinforcements have arrived. When Broish asks how many there are, Riko checks her binoculars and figures it's just one rider. She then announces that Leo is approaching the fort. Not long after this, Leo rides into the fort, so Godwin bows while Broish pays her respects. Just then, Leo hops off her ride and asks Godwin to stand down. When Leo adds that she needs to talk to Gaul, Broish announces that the fort is now a battleground and she can't let Leo through. Hearing this, Leo takes out her axe and says she's not as weak as she used to be. Suddenly, Leo activates her seal while Broish draws her sword. After they clash weapons for a while, Broish says she heard Galette has been more aggressive with frequent invasions, but Leo says it's how they do things in Galette. Broish then chips in that the Biscottians can barely hold regular events, but in response, Leo says that the dog princess only holds lame events and asks how that's supposed to help people relieve stress. On hearing this, Broish admits that Milhai sucks in some ways, but adds that she'll get better over time. So Leo activates her seal and says that no one can get in her way. Suddenly, she charges towards Broish, who then tosses her sword up and allows herself get knocked down by Leo. After Broish surrenders, Leo leaves with Godwin and commends her on taking down the legendary knight. However, Leo explains that Broish only used a fraction of her strength and merely let her pass. Just then she opens a door and finds Eclair fighting against the three other ladies. Meanwhile, while Shinku and Gaul duel, Gaul asks if a concert was really planned, and Shinku explains that he's been trying to tell him all along. Just when Gaul blames his subordinates for the kidnap, Leo breaks in through a wall and furiously asks why they're playing around on a battlefield. Horrified, the boys apologize to Leo, so she heads to the room where Milhai was confined while the boys follow with swollen heads. On entering the room, she apologizes to Milhai on behalf of Gaul for interrupting her concert. Just when Milhai chips in that Gaul is innocent, Leo says she'll find a way to make it up to her. While backing her, Leo tells Milhai to leave and leaves the room. Afterwards, Gaul checks Milhai's schedule and freaks out when he realizes they can't get her on stage in time for the concert. So, Milhai glances at Shinku with a smile which make him remember Gaul's ultimate attack. He announces that he can get Milhai to Biscotti for the concert, surprising Gaul, who then asks how he intends to do that. So Shinku sweeps Milhai onto his back and announces that he got the idea from Gaul. He then channels his life force to his feet and pulls a Barry Allen. On the run, Milhai points out that Shinku has gotten better at using his abilities. Shortly after, while Brioche has fun with some beast balls, Milhai and Shinku breeze past her and vanish in seconds. Shortly after, Yuki catches up with Shinku and introduces herself as the head of the cover ops squad. In response, Shinku commends her for fighting well in the battle. After this, Yuki says she's a good runner and offers to take turns carrying Milhai. But Shinku says he's good and adds that he has figured out a better way to run faster. He then asks Milhai if it's true that using his life power can be more efficient when he has a clear image in his head. When Milhai confirms this, Shinku activates his ring and creates a surfboard beneath himself. While he glides on it, Yuki catches up and comments on how amazing it is. Just then, Shinku announces that he's going ahead and activates a boost effect on the glider, so he zooms off, leaving Yuki behind. Afterwards, when he puts Milhai down on the glider, she tells him to go easy on himself, since using too much of his life power has dire consequences. Shortly after, Milhai reveals that she's been a useless ruler by causing trouble for Shinku. However, Shinku says she's wrong and adds that he's glad to have met her. While he pep talks her into believing she doesn't suck that much, the glider flies high and Shinku grabs her waist like he's been practicing all his life for that moment. Minutes later, Milhai arrives at the concert hall and apologizes for showing up late. Just then, Amelita announces that she's got only 10 minutes, so the crew gets to work while Amelita asks Milhai if she's ready for the performance. A few moments later, Milhai appears on stage and the crowd cheers. After she gives credit to Shinku and the knights, Milhai begins her performance while everyone watches. Meanwhile, Eclair calls Laurent to ask if Shinku is alright since he used his life power recklessly. In response, Laurent says he's burned out, so some maids attended to him and took their leave. After the battle at the fort, the rest of Galette's army withdrew its forces from Biscotti. While this happens, Milhai addresses the Knights of Biscotti and commends their performance in battle. After this, Laurent and Eclair were rewarded for their efforts. Some days later, Shinku and Rico visit the kitchen, and the cooks offer them a bowl of food. After this, they requested that Shinku help them deliver some food to the knights too. So when he arrives on the training grounds, he marvels at the moves of the training knights. Just then, Laurent approaches them and announces that their food has arrived. Rico then approaches Eclair to notify her about the food, but Eclair says she'd rather train some more. Uninvited, Shinku shows up and offers to be her punching bag, so Laurent tells the knights to pay attention to the fight. Moments later, Eclair asks Shinku what his weapon of choice is, so he picks up a sword and shows off his skills. While the audience applauds him, Eclair scoffs and calls him a show-off. Suddenly, the fight begins, and while they clash swords, Laurent says it's nice to see someone good enough to take on Eclair. Afterwards, Laurent chips in that they'll look good together as a couple, but their swords suddenly break. Eclair then says she feels weird, so Shinku feels her temple and tries to play Dr. Creep, but annoys Eclair in the process. So she punches him in the gut for touching a knight's forehead and stomps the life out of him. Afterwards, Shinku rides out of town with a dog and decides to rant to it about his bad luck with girls. Shortly after this, he arrives at Yuki's house, and together they join Broish at the lake. So, when Shinku sits to fish with Broish, she comments that he's an interesting person since he has earned the trust of everyone in the castle in a matter of days. However, when Shinku says Eclair still beats him up sometimes, Broish replies, saying it means she's able to let her guard down around him. Suddenly, Shinku feels a tug on his hook and pulls out a huge fish from the lake. Afterwards, while they eat, Broish points out that he's from another world and asks if he plans on returning. Just then, Shinku realizes he still hasn't figured out how to return, so he throws a tantrum. After this, Broish comments that it's rumored that summoned heroes can't return, but she then states that in faraway lands, rumors have it that a hero can return after fulfilling certain duties. When Shinku lights up on hearing this, Yuki says that Rico has looked into it and has discovered that the rumors may be true. Afterwards, the ladies ask about his family. Shinku tells them about his family and wonders how Becky is doing. Meanwhile, on Earth, Becky's mom tries to get her out of bed and accuses her of slacking off just because Shinku isn't around. In response, Becky says it has nothing to do with Shinku, but a few moments later, she wonders if Shinku has gotten a new girlfriend. She then decides to check her fortune for the week on her phone and realizes it's mediocre. After this, she checks Shinku and realizes that his fortune is horrible for the week, so she worries about him. In Flonyard, Milhai asks Laurent how Shinku is spending his day, and Amelita points out that she has asked everyone the same question all day. Ignoring this, Laurent reveals that Shinku is hanging out with Broish, so Milhai asks if he thinks Broish likes Shinku, and Laurent explains that everyone likes him. Just then, Amelita informs Milhai that she has created some time on her schedule to hang out and relax with Shinku later that day. Suddenly, Milhai gets excited and thanks her. Later that day, Shinku rides into town with Broish, and while the people marvel at the size of Broish's ride, Broish announces that she's heading to the knight's quarters and wishes Shinku luck on his date with the princess. After they parted ways, Shinku gets stripped by the maids and washed in preparation to meet the princess. Despite his protests, the maids refuse to let him visit the princess unwashed. Not long after this, Milhai gets notified of Shinku's arrival, so he orders the guards to let him through. He then joins the princess at the table, and she serves him some tea. So Shinku compliments the Biscotti tea. Milhai reveals that the tea is one of the wonders of their world. Just then, Milhai apologizes to Shinku for summoning him, but Shinku says he's having a best time of his life. Shortly after, Shinku asks Milhai why she chose him for the summoning, and she reveals that she used a type of seal's spell named Star Composition, which allows her to see the future and also things from faraway worlds. In addition, she states that one day, while using it, she saw Shinku doing his best at a battlefield built like a castle. When she states that it's why she wanted him to be the hero, Shink sinks into the table and reveals it was an athletics competition where he lost to a lady. To make matters worse, Milhai points out that she saw the girl who won, so Shinku reveals that he was so close to winning. While he reveals how embarrassed he felt since his family and friends watched him lose, Milhai comments that his tears were beautiful and adds that it's why she chose him. At the knight's quarters, Laurent thanks Broish for showing up to help Biscotti, but Broish says she's happy to help. When Laurent states that she's loyal to Biscotti, Broish says she's just a simple wanderer. So Laurent asks if she'll be staying for a while, but Broish says she'll have to depend on Yuki's star composition to find what she's looking for. After this, Broish adds that Galette seems to have become more troublesome and blames Leo for this. She then insinuates that beasts might be involved in whatever Gaul is up to and grabs her sword while saying she's got it covered. Afterwards, when Shinku walks Milhai off, she requests to see him the next day, so he agrees to show up and takes his leave. While Milhai walks with her maids, one of them asks if she's going on a date with Shinku, and she confirms that they're going for a walk together the next day. Just then, Milhai recalls that she used to go on walks with Leo. Meanwhile, in Gaul, Leo gets furious about the results of using her star composition and wonders why it hasn't changed even after the war. She then wonders why she can't see the future clearly and stares at pictures of Shinku and Milhai in a pool of blood, alongside a writing which states that they'll both be dead in 30 days. Frustrated, Leo decides she must change the future and checks out her ultimate weapon. The next day, Milhai wraps up some paperwork while one of her maids tells her that working early in the day is unhealthy for her. However, Milhai says she has to finish her work so she can enjoy herself. Outside the castle, Shinku asks a knight if a Sarakuru belongs to the princess, and the knight reveals that it's a special kind of Sarakuru. Just then, Shinku tries to get familiar with it, but when the princess steps out, she finds her Sarakuru snacking on Shinku's head, so she smiles and says that they seem to be getting along, but Shinku asks her to save him from losing his head to the beast. Moments later, while Shinku rides the Sarakuru with Milhai and shortly after, they arrive in a field of flowers. Milhai then says it's where she takes walks or does her picnics, but Shinku suggests they get exercise done first. Suddenly, he conjures a discus with his ring and explains how it's used. After a few tosses, Milhai gets the hang of it and tosses the discus really high. Just then, Shinki conjures his rod to boost his jump and a glider to bring him down. Afterwards, they sit under a tree and Milhai commends Shinku's mastery of the Palladian ring. In response, Shinku points out that the Palladian is a sword and states that he hasn't been able to make the ring form a sword. So Milhai explains that the ring changes when the right situation presents itself. After this, she adds that she also owns a sacred sword and shows him her ring while claiming it hasn't awakened to her. When Shinku marvels at the sacred swords of Biscotti, Milhai reveals that Gaul has 2 sacred swords too. So, Shinku asks if he has to hand over the ring whenever he's returning home, and Milhai says he has to. However, Shinku says he'd like to borrow it when next he's summoned. Surprised, Milhai asks if he wants to be summoned again, and Shinku asks if that's impossible. When Milhai agrees to summon him again, Shinku rubs her head and tickles her on the cheek while she makes funny sounds. Meanwhile, in the bath, Eclair asks Yuki about her trip, but she says it's nothing special. But when Rico and Eclair try to get the gist out of her, Yuki says that she can talk about anything else except the mission, since it is confidential. The next day, while Milhai's maids dress her up and they talk about her hangover with Shinku, it gets announced on the news that Leo has made a shocking announcement. Just then, the news displays footage of Leo announcing that since Biscotti summoned a hero and also welcomes back the famous Broish, they can't just sit and watch them get stronger. So she declares another war on Biscotti and allows them to decide the specifics of the battle. After this, Leo announces that she would like to bet the 2 sacred swords of Gaul and demands that Biscotti offer something of equal value. While Milhai wonders what's going on, Lo urges the people of Biscotti and Gaul to join in the battle. Later, when Shinku points out that the sacred swords are symbols of the leaders of a nation, Rico chips in that it is sometimes exchanged between countries as a form of diplomacy. In addition, Yuki states that the people think it's just diplomacy, but something deeper is going on. Meanwhile, in a meeting with Milhai, the elders wonder if Leo is trying to take over Biscotti. Laurent then asks Emilita to read the declaration of war. So, after she reads that the ownership of the sacred swords will be transferred for a maximum of 60 days, the council deliberates on what to do. Outside the castle, Shinku wonders if there's anything he can do, but Rico says it's a political thing and says it's up to Milhai and the other leaders. Just then, they found a group of knights gathered around a Gaul soldier disguised as a knight. When the knights accuse her of spying for the battle, the girl reveals she's got a message for Shinku. A few moments later, Shinku rides with her to meet up with Gaul. When Shinku asks what he needs, Gaul reveals that he and Godwin are against the war since there are many things they don't understand about it. Shinku then chips in that some people think Gaul is trying to take over Biscotti. However, Gaul debunks this and explains that both countries have been allies for generations and adds that it's pointless to become enemies now. In addition, Shinku states that it's impossible to cancel the war since it has been made public, and offers to talk to Leo about wagering with sacred swords. After this, Gaul tells Shinku to ensure Biscotti wins the war if Leo doesn't listen to him. So, Gaul takes his leave and tells Shinku to keep their meeting secret. In response, Shinku asks Gaul if it's true that Leo and Emlai used to be friends, but he says he has no idea about that. Back in Galit, Leo gets informed of Gaul's movements, but she says she expects nothing from him or Godwin. Meanwhile, Shinku asks Amulita about Milhai and Leo's relationship, so she narrates that they were once like sisters who did everything together, even after they both became rulers, until the previous year, when Leo became obsessed with Milhai's living conditions and safety. However, Amulita reveals that Leo suddenly changed after some months and ghosted Milhai totally. The next day, a large crowd gathers for the battle, so Milhai steps up to address them. She then announces that the declaration of war was unexpected and that Biscotti is not weak. In addition, she states that they've got better weapons and well-trained knights, so she accepts Galet's declaration of war. While the crowd cheers to this, Milhai adds that they'll be wagering the holy swords and urges her people to win the war. The next day, Shinku types a text, telling Becky that he's doing well and will be participating in a small match. Just then, he gets a reply from Becky, telling him to be careful and wishing him good luck. So, Shinku gets on his Sarakuru and decides to fight alongside everyone. Moments later, Milhai addresses her people, and after hyping them up a bit, she tells those who aren't in the army to clear a path for the knights. She then explains the objective of the war to them and urges anyone who needs help to reach out to the medics. Backstage, the elders tell Milhai to be careful, so she assures them that she'll be fine and tells the scholars to keep researching ways to get Shinku back to his world. At that moment, some maids arrive and announce that Milhai's cart is ready, so she faces Rico and asks how they plan to come along. Rico then responds by saying it's going perfectly. While the battalions march out, the broadcasters chirp about the unusual numbers that turned up for the battle. At the same time, the broadcasters from Galet talk about the numbers too and add that Gaul is ready for battle. While Galet's army marches out, some knights spread rumors about places where their powers will be weaker. However, another knight debunks this and says they'll only be fighting in safe locations. Just then, another knight chips in that ghosts lurking at the fort they're headed to, but she gets interrupted by Godwin, who then says they'd simply cut down the ghosts. However, a smart one chips in that they might encounter demons in places where their powers are weaker. When she explains that demons feed on the powers of the land and bring catastrophe wherever they go, some other knights freak out and protest against scary stories. However, Godwin says demons are supposed to be locked beneath the earth, but Noir says she heard they exist and insists she's not lying. Just then, Godwin screams and tells them to cut the crap. Meanwhile, Gaul feels bad for failing to make Leo reveal her reasons for the war. Meanwhile, Leo flashes back to the moment she informed her aides about her star composition predictions about Milhai and Shinku's deaths. After expressing her concerns, Leo revealed that the vision showed that the bearers of Biscotti's sacred sword rings would die. She then states her intention to step down from power and adds that she plans to change the future by taking Biscotti's sacred swords. Hearing this, Leo's aide asked what would happen to Galet without her, but Leo said that Galet would rule in her place since she was only warming the throne till he grows old enough to rule. While her aides tried to talk her out of it, Leo shut her ears and ignored them. So, one of the aides came up with the plan to declare war on Biscotti to get their swords and keep them hidden to benefit both countries. Somewhere in the mountains, Biscotti's army marches alongside Milhai's cart, so the broadcasters freak out when the princess waves at them. Meanwhile, Violet, a spy from Galet, observes from the top of a mountain and complains that a surprise attack goes against the rules of war. When she decides to take the blame, the other spies say they've got her back. So, Violet announces that their mission's objective is to grab all valuables and steal the holy sword from Milhai. While Shinku rides with Yuki and others, Eclair complains about being grouped with an idiot like him. While Shinku feels bad for himself, Broish tells him to make sure he gets along with Eclair, but Shinku protests by saying she picks on him all the time. Just then, Eclair accuses him of doing stupid things. While Broish wonders what she means, Yuki explains that Shinku fondled her balloons the first day they met. Amused, Broish asks if that's true, but Shinku and Eclair deny this and claim it's a misunderstanding. Facing Yuki, Eclair asks how she knows, so Yuki reveals that Rico showed her the recordings. Hearing this, Broish commends Shinku for being bold, but Shinku says it was an accident. Just then, Eclair tries to knock him off his ride. Later, when both armies arrive at the battlefield, and while they wait for the signal to begin, Eclair plots with Shinku to sneak through the quickest route since no one would be focused on them. She then orders the Spell Battalion to hold off with the bombing and follow them while protecting Rico. Suddenly, fireworks go off, and the battle begins, so both armies charge towards each other. But to Shinku's surprise, the first attackers come for him. While he blames Eclair for her wrong prediction, the enemies fire lots of arrows, so Shinku and Eclair launch a counterattack, which deflects the arrows. Despite this, the enemies still attack Shinku, so Yuki fires an arrow that dispels them in a whirlwind. Meanwhile, some of the enemies catch up with Eclair, so she tells them to get out of her way if they don't want to be knocked out. But she soon gets surrounded by the Galette army, who shows up asking if she could drain their sacks.
What do you mean by that?
Just then, Eclair realizes she must have revealed herself because of Shinku, so she spins her rod and knocks down all the attackers in a single swing. While it rains beast balls all around her, Shinku catches up and says that the Palladian is being targeted. Since it's too late to change their plans, Eclair suggests Shinku avoid using the ring. After this, they agree to blast through everything in their way. While the battle gets tougher, Broish and Yuki dash through the field, making it rain beast balls. While the broadcasters do their job, Gaul suddenly attacks with his battalion from the rear of the Biscottians. At the Biscottians' camp, Milhai gets notified that a messenger from Galette has arrived to speak to her, but when Milhai asks her guard to let her through, an assassin barges in and snaps the guard's neck. Just then, Violet apologizes for her rude approach and begs Milhai to listen to her request. Suddenly, the illusion disappears, and Rico reveals she's just disguising herself as Milhai. So, the spies get captured, and they surrender. Rico then sends a fireworks signal, and when Shinku spots it, Eclair points out that the headquarters got raided. Immediately, Rico transforms into Milhai, and she says Leo must be up to something since she has always played fair when it comes to war. So she rides off and decides to ask Leo herself. Back in Galette, a maid informs Leo that Violet and her crew have been captured, so she asks what Gaul is doing. The maid then reveals that he's on his way with Godwin and Genoise as she ordered. When the maid adds that Gaul and Godwin are not pleased with the war, Leo says they can do whatever they want and decides she can win the war alone. Meanwhile, on their way, Gaul expresses his disapproval of the war and suggests they hold back a little in their attack. He then apologizes to Godwin for getting him stuck doing a boring job, but Godwin says he's fine as long as he rides with Gaul. Just then, Gaul gets informed that Milhai is not at the fort they're going to attack, so he gets excited and announces that they'll conquer the fort without any hesitation. On the battlefield, the soldiers fight on while the battle scores rise in favor of the Biscotti army. At the same time, Biscotti's 2nd Battalion gets closer to the fort in Galette. However, the Galette army gets stuck at a bridge where Broish keeps making beast balls of them. She then announces that the Biscotti headquarters is just past the bridge and urges the Galette army to bring it on. Suddenly, they charge towards her, but Broish launches an explosive attack that makes it rain beast balls. Horrified by this, the Galette army flees while Broish gets notified to join the 2nd Battalion. Just then, Brashi orders Yuki and the army with her to push through the enemy lines. Suddenly, Bernard, a famous commander, appears out of nowhere and says he can't let them pass. Broish then asks if that's a challenge, and Bernard tells her it is what it is. Suddenly, Roland shows up and announces that he'll be fighting Bernard instead, so Broish charges off with her battalion, leaving Roland to deal with Bernard. While this goes on, the broadcasters explain that both commanders are friends with equal strengths, so they attack each other. Meanwhile, at the fort in Biscotti, Gaul and his army wreak havoc and devastate the Biscotti guards. After they were done eliminating the guards, Godwin swigs his chain ball and eliminates what's left of the Biscotti guards. Suddenly, Rico rides Milhai's Sekuruku and activates her seal to escape the fort. However, when the bird takes off, many enemy archers fire their arrows to bring it down, but the bird evades them. Just then, Emilio, one of the Galette knights, shoots a magic arrow that pierces through Rico and makes her clothes disappear. While she falls without clothes, the army watches in wonder. Just then, someone from the Biscotti army shoots a counterattack, which wipes out the archer squad of the Galette armies and puts the squad leader's melons on HD display. Emilio then says that he can't let Rico's sacrifice be in vain. Just then, Sarakuru catches Rico mid-air as she flies away to meet Milhai and Shinku. At the fort in Galette, the specially equipped guards prepare to attack the advancing forces of Biscotti. So Eclair orders the soldiers to surround Milhai, while the armies of Galette prepare to use their weapons. Seeing cannons and rifles, Shinku fidgets, so Eclair asks if he recalls a spell she taught him. However, since he's clueless, Eclair says he'll be the defense while she charges through the enemy lines. Suddenly, Shinku conjures a shield, and the shots from the cannons begin to land. Just then, the Galater army targets Shinku and launches a missile, but he deflects it with his rod, to the surprise of everyone. Afterwards, Shinku asks Eclair what she thinks, but she calls him a show-off. She then leaps off her ride and launches an attack that blasts the guards of the fort. So Eclair orders the soldiers to clear out what's left of the fort guards. Suddenly, dark clouds take over the sky while Leo has a vision about Milhai's death and her battle with a monster. When Leo snaps out of it, a whistle sounds everywhere, and on hearing it, a knight asks what the sound means. In response, Yuki explains that it's a sort of warning. So, Broish decides to ride ahead with Yuki to take care of anything dangerous. Shortly after, Shinku and Eclair arrive inside the fort with some knights and get a message from Leo asking them to meet her at the top of the fort, and she offers them a one-on-one match as a reward for making it there. She then shows off her sacred swords and threatens to destroy Milhai's camp when she lays hold of the Palladian. While she checks out the weather, the elevator opens, and to her surprise, Milhai shows up holding one of the sacred swords. Suddenly, Leo gets flashbacks of the vision and couldn't believe her eyes. After this, Milhai shows Leo the 2 rings and asks her to reveal the real reason behind the war. Suddenly, Rouge attacks Milhai and tries to seize the rings, but Milhai activates the rings and blasts her off. While Leo stares awestruck, Milhai conjures a sword and tells Leo that she would gladly lend her the sword if she explains why she needs them. Since Leo refuses to respond, Milhai reminds her of the good times when they were buddies. Suddenly, she tears up and asks Leo if she hates her. Meanwhile, Shinku and Eclair worry about the princess, so Shinku suggests they climb the building to the top since the elevator stopped working. On the roof, Rouge suggests that Milhai and Leo take cover under a roof, but then a vibration rocks the building, so they stop and wonder what it is. Suddenly, the sky stage on the rooftop levitates, while a strange object descends from the sky. As the object enlarges, Milhai asks if it's the god of the land, but Leo says it must be a demon sealed deep beneath the earth. Suddenly, the structure sends out a shockwave, and flames erupt from different spots on the earth. Just when the floating stage gets hit by the erupting flames, the demon reaches out of its cocoon and roars, while Milhai wonders if it's crying. Eventually, when the demon jail breaks, Milhai picks up her sword, so the demon surrounds them with sharp tentacles. However, Leo surrounds herself with a shield and slashes off some of the tentacles. When she turns to see if Milhai is okay, more tentacles show up, and Milhai tries to protect her, but gets slashed open by the tentacles. After this, the monster absorbs her body, leaving Leo shocked and furious, so she grabs her axe and activates it, but the demon attacks her first and loses one of its tails. Suddenly, Leo charges out of the smoke and attacks the demon's head with the axe. When she lands, she calls out for Milhai, hoping she's alright, but the demon returns and knocks her down onto the rooftop. After this, the demon lands and walks away from the building while Shinku and Eclair arrive on the rooftop. Just then, they find Rouge cradling Leo and ask if the demon did that to her, but Rouge reveals that Milhai was absorbed by the demon. Hearing this, Eclair chips in that it's only a matter of time before Milhai runs out of energy, so Shinku says he can't allow that. While this goes on, Milhai finds herself in a strange place, where a fox spirit shows up and apologizes for the harm her child has caused. On the other side, Shinku says that he can catch up with the demon by using his abilities and the floating rocks. However, Eclair says he's too weak to pull that off, so when he activates his powers, she offers to go with him. Afterwards, Shinku and Eclair chase after the demon using his glider, and not long after this, they get attacked by tentacles, so Eclair activates her sword and cuts them off. Using his experience in athletics, Shinku finds the shortest route and goes after the demon. Just then, Eclair almost collides with a rock, so Shinku tells Eclair to crouch while he takes the hit and bleeds. While Eclair marvels at this, Shinku says getting hurt is nothing compared to letting down friends who believe in him. As he gets closer to the demon, Eclair realizes he's running out of juice, so she offers to help him, but when he remains adamant, she falls off the Eclair and boosts it with a blast from her swords to help Shinku catch up with the demon. Shortly after, Shinku crash lands on the demon and rushes to rescue Milhai while blocking attacks launched by the demon's tails. Eventually, Shinku gets slashed by one of the tails, and while he bleeds, he gets bombarded by more attacks. Fortunately for him, he summoned a shield that protected him from getting roasted. Looking ahead, he spots Milhai and flashes back to the athletics competition, where he let down his loved ones, who showed up to cheer for him. He then decides it won't happen again, so he summons his sword and charges towards Milhai's body. Meanwhile, Milhai hangs out with the fox spirit on the other side, and the spirit narrates how she used to live peacefully with her child, until one day when the skies got dark, and she found her child pierced by a possessed blade which fell from the sky. However, when she tried to wake him, the child transformed into a demon and ravaged the land. After this, the spirit narrates that the demon was sealed some years ago, but has been unleashed by Milhai's sword. In addition to this, the spirit explains that her child has been weeping since it transformed, so Milhai watches the little fox cry for help and beg for death. Just then, the fox spirit requests that Milhai put an end to the little fox's suffering. But she refuses and states that she won't allow their lives to end just like that since they're a part of Flonyard. Suddenly, the orb containing Milhai's absorbed body cracks, and she falls into Shinku's arms. However, when she awakens and realizes she's without clothes, they both freak out. Suddenly, Milhai reveals that the demon used to be a normal earth deity and says it can be restored by removing the cursed blade. So, Shinku gets up to find the blade, but Milhai says she's going with him. However, Shinku reminds her she's without clothes, so her sword glows brightly and dresses her up. While they marvel at this, the Palladian ring on Shinku glows, and he gets a new outfit and sword too. So they spot the sword, but the demon roars and conjures more tentacles. Seeing this, Shinku summons his glider, and he blazes through the tentacles together with Milhai. Just then, they wipe out the tentacles with blasts from the holy swords while the demon cries out. Suddenly, Milhai and Shinku try to remove the cursed sword while the demon tries to shake them off. Eventually, when they take out the sword, Shinku falls off with it, while Milhai catches the little fox. The cursed sword then grows tentacles, which freak Shinku out, but Leo shoots a demon blasting arrow, which breaks the sword. Shocked, Shinku asks where the arrow came from, so Milhai reveals that it was shot by Leo. Suddenly, the earth beneath them begins to crumble, so Shinku carries Milhai on his back and realizes there's no foothold between him and the fort, so he looks around for a way out. Fortunately, Rico and Eclair arrive flying a Sarakuru, and they then apologize for showing up later. A few minutes later, while they flew on the Sarakuru, Shinku says he's glad Eclair made it, while Milhai thanks Rico for coming through. So Rico narrates that she saw Eclair falling from the sky and picked her up. Somewhere in the forest, the cursed sword still lives and waggles its tentacles, so Broish finds it and says she's impressed that Shinku and Milhai could defeat a demon under the influence of a cursed sword. Just then, Yuki shows up and says she never doubted them since they're capable. Just when they decide to finish off what's left of the cursed sword, the tentacles attack Broish, while Yuki activates a spell to suppress the sword for good. Suddenly, the sword's tentacles grow larger, so Yuki attacks it with many magical swords and eventually summons a blade with which she seals away the cursed sword for good. After this, they decide to head back and report to the fort. Meanwhile, at the fort, Milhai narrates her encounter with the fox spirit on the other side, so Yuki kneels and thanks Milhai for being brilliant. However, when Milhai says she did pull it off alone, Yuki says she'll give Shinku a petting later. A few moments later, Milhai asks Yukin if the spirit she met was real, but Yuki explains that the fox spirit has already been taken out by the demon, but it only existed because she cares about her son. Yuki then says that the fox spirit has moved on since her son is saved, and also asks if she could keep the little fox. So, Milhai hands over the little fox to Yuki, while Eclair wonders if Leo is fine. Shortly after this, Leo gets informed by her maid that the war was put on hold for everyone to watch the broadcast of their fight against the demon. So Leo requests to have a meeting with the media and openly apologizes. Afterwards, she put an end to the war, since no one had ever seen anything like the demon they faced. Later that night, Biscotti prepares a surprise performance to celebrate the end of the war. Meanwhile, Laurent commends Shinku for his contributions to the fight against the demon, but when Shinku points out that Eclair still got hurt, Laurent tells him that he doesn't need to worry about that, since her wound is more honorable. Shinku then comments that he thought Flonyard was a peaceful world, and in response, Laurent explains that no one has ever seen a demon that huge and reminds him it's safest to stay within the protected zones. Just then, Eclair shows up and tells Laurent that he's needed for security issues. After he leaves, Shinku asks if she's strong enough to be moving around, but Eclair says she's fine and, in turn, asks Shinku if he has eaten. When Shinku says he hasn't, Eclair suggests they go get some food, while Rico and Yuki peek at them from behind a tree. Shortly after, when Shinku arrives with some drinks, Eclair hands him a snack, and while they eat, Eclair states that she couldn't have protected Milhai on her own and thanks Shinku. After this, Shinku points out that she could have pulled it off without him since she has always been in charge of Milhai's safety. Not long after this, Rico and Yuki get busted while spying, and Gaul arrives to ruin the date by talking about how his sister changed things in the country after the battle with the demon. Just then, the other chips in that both countries are now at peace, so a dog arrives with a letter for Rico, and on checking it, she announces that the academy wants her to contact them right away. So she announces that she's got things to take care of and leaves. While Milhai prepares for her performance, she gets informed that she has a guest. Shortly after, she talks to Leo outside the tent, and Leo apologizes for causing so much trouble and putting her in danger. In response, Milhai says it has taught her many lessons as a leader, so she thanks Leo for doing everything just to protect her. Surprised, Leo asks how she found out about that, so Milhai reveals that Rouge and Violet explained everything to her. Milhai then tells Leo that she shouldn't have risked her life just because of a star reading, and also adds that she has a lot of people she trusts with her life. Afterwards, Leo flashes back to when they were young and says that Milhai's kindness helped her. When Leo states that she couldn't bear to lose her, Milhai says she's not dying anytime soon. Just then, Milhai gets called in for some rehearsals, so Leo says she'd like to stay and listen to Milhai sing. After a while, the lights go off and the stage lights come on, so the crowd goes crazy while she begins her performance. During the performance, Yuki tells the young fox that Milhai saved it, so the young fox suddenly glows and beautifies the stage with some trees. Meanwhile, Rico is alone somewhere and weeps. After Milhai's performance, the armies of Gaul and Biscotti return to their various territories at dawn. When Shinku and the others ride into town, they get a hero's welcome, but Rico says she's got something to attend to at the academy and hurries off. When she arrives at the academy, she asks about the research on Shinku's return, and the scholars explain that they've analyzed the spell and realized it isn't difficult once they have made the necessary preparations. Reading from the document, Rico figures that for the spell to work, some requirements must be met. So Rico asks if anyone has been told yet, but the scholars say it's still confidential. Meanwhile, Shinku crashes into his bed but is surprised when Rico shows up and announces that she has found a way to send him back. Afterwards, when she reveals that he could be sent back in the next 3 days, Shinku says he'd be happy about that. However, Rico explains that he won't be able to return to Flonyard, and he'll lose whatever knowledge or memory of the world he has. Hearing this, Shinku realizes it must be why she looked gloomy the previous night. Just then, Rico tears up and feels bad as the head of the academy. After blaming herself for failing to find a happy ending, Shinku tries to console him. However, Rico says it hurts, since he's been getting along pretty well with Milhai. So Shinku says he has a feeling he won't forget everything he experienced, and also adds that there must be some way to return to Flonyard. He then asks if she has told anyone else, but Rico says she hasn't. So Shinku requests that she keep the requirements secret. When Rico wonders why, Shinku explains that it's sad enough that he's leaving, and knowing that he'll never return will only make things worse. Meanwhile, Milhai's maids point out that she seems to be in a good mood, so Milhai reveals that she's going on a walk with Shinku the next day. At the knight's quarters, Emilio asks Eclair if Shinku will be joining them for training the next day, but Eclair retorts and asks why he is asking her. In response, the knight says that they seem to get along pretty well, annoying Eclair, who then reveals that Shinku is going to see Broish the next day, and he might only show up at noon. At Broish's house, she announces that Shinku is coming over the next day, so they decide to prepare a feast. At the same time, Gaul asks Leo if he could visit Shinku since they have some unfinished business. In response, Leo says he can, since she'll be visiting too in 2 days' time. However, she tells him to stay out of trouble. Sometime later, Milhai asks Rico if she's found a way to send Shinku back. In response, Rico reveals that she has and states that Milhai needs to perform the ritual in 3 days' time. Hearing this, Milhai says even though she knows she'll see him again soon, it's sad to see him leave. The next day, Shinku and Milhai play around the flowery fields, and just then, he drops a pocket watch. Surprised, Milhai asks if he carries that around, and Shinku reveals that it's a prize he won at the athletics competition where she watched him, and states that it's a reminder for coming second. Afterwards, at the training grounds, Shinku surprises Eclair when he shows up to train and suggests they spar again. So she accepts his challenge and says he's about to get worked over badly. Later that afternoon, Shinku shows up at Broish's house and asks how the little fox is faring. In response, Yuki says that as a fellow deity, she'll make sure to raise it well. When Shinku freaks out on hearing this, Yuki explains that she's an earth deity and demands to be respected. After this, she narrates how Broish found her wandering in the forest alone after her parents had been eaten by demons. When Broish chips in that her country also got destroyed by demons over 150 years back, Shinku freaks out. Just then, Yuki says it has been peaceful in Flonyard for a long time, while Broish explains that, since they have the power to seal demons, they travel around continents while using Biscotti as their home base. Surprised, Shinku asks Broish if she's a god too, but Broish reveals she's human. She then says that she has other reasons for remaining young and adds that she could have taught him the spell if he weren't leaving soon. So when Shinku says he's interested in learning the spell, Broish decides to teach him. Later, while he heads home and convinces himself that the spell can't be learned in a day, Gaul and his subordinates show up along his path. Just then, they present a souvenir to him from Leo. Meanwhile, at the academy, Riko racks her brain trying to find a happy ending for everyone. At the same time, Shinku arm wrestles Gaul, and just when one of Gaul's subordinates shows up to serve them drinks, she trips and covers Shinku in orange juice. After this, she cleans up the mess while the others explain that she's a klutz. Gaul suggests that Shinku take a bath while they clean the mess, so Shinku thanks them and heads to the bath. But this time, he reads the signs on the entrance and assumes he is entering the bath for males. However, to his dismay, he enters the bath and hears a maid say she made a mistake. He then gets a glimpse of paradise and freaks out.
Oh my!
However, Milhai tells him to keep quiet, so the maid announces that the mistake with the signs has been corrected. So Milhai requests that Shinku keep his face covered, so she gets a towel and suggests they get in the bath together, since she's covered. Afterwards, Milhai asks Shinku when he plans to return to Flonyard, so Shinku says it depends on how long he'll be spending. He then lists all the possible holidays he could spend there, and Milhai comments that he could come with his friends. When Shinku thanks Milhai, she asks if he remembers her name, and after they laugh about it, Shinku says that he can't do that in front of other people since he'll get scolded. However, Shinku says there's no way he could forget her name. So he chips in that he enjoys calling her princess, and tickles Milhai in all the right spots. Later that night, Shinku couldn't sleep, so he stayed up, staring at the moon. The next day, when Leo visits Biscotti, she says that Shinku is leaving too soon since she had planned on training him in Gaul. In response, Shinku suggests they save that for later. Meanwhile, Milhai pets Leo, and just when she gets excited, Shinku asks a maid if Leo is always like that. In response, the maid says that she acts like the younger one whenever she's around Milhai. Later that day, Shinku gets taken to a party, and while he asks if he's supposed to be there, Yuki announces his arrival, and everyone claps. Just then, Milhai introduces Shinku and announces that he'll be returning to his home soon. She then reveals that the party was thrown in his honor, so she asks him to step and say a few words. Suddenly, Yuki pushes him forward, so he reluctantly mounts the stage and takes the mic. Afterwards, Shinku reveals that he was just an ordinary student in his world when he got summoned and talks about how much fun he has had since he arrived at Flonyard. After he recognizes everyone who was nice to him, Shinku promises not to forget his experience and promises to return whenever they need him. After the send-off party, while everyone lies around hungover from the previous night, Shinku stares outside his window. Shortly after this, he goes on a walk with Milhai, and she asks when his next summer break is coming up. In response, Shinku says it's in 100 days, so Milhai says she'll miss him. So Shinku says he might be free on long weekends in case there's an emergency where they need him. Just then, he asks if a huge ceremony is necessary, but Milhai insists that it is, since he's a hero. Some moments later, at his send-off ceremony, the elders announce his departure, so Milhai takes the Palladian ring from him. Meanwhile, at the academy, Riko continues to hustle for a way to prevent a sad ending. So, Shinku shows up in his school uniform while Riko tears up and berates herself for failing to find a solution. Shinku then consoles her by saying she has done enough for him, and there's no way he could forget all that. After this, Shinku announces that he's got some presents for her, so he brings out 2 portable speakers and a 4-colored pen. He then tells her to have fun taking them apart, but Riko says she'd rather treasure them forever. Some moments later, Eclair rides out with Shinku, and she complains about being stuck looking after him till the bitter end. In response, Shinku says he's glad she's accompanying him. Ignoring this, Eclair announces that Milhai has begun preparing the spell at the summoning grounds and suggests they move faster. Just then, Shinku offers Eclair his handkerchief, and she decides to hold on to it. She then asks why he's handing out mementos to people and adds that she's not fond of that. After a while, Eclair asks if it is true that he'll never return to Flonyard, so Shinku explains that he'd lose all his memories of the world and asks how she found out. In response, Eclair says she could tell from the way Riko is acting. While they ride along, Eclair says she never imagined sending him back would be so difficult. Shinku then says he'll never forget meeting her and suffering from her short temper, but Eclair says she won't remember him since she'll be busy training. When Shinku says that's sad, Eclair tells him never to forget and requests that he return to them as soon as he can. Shortly after this, Shinki arrives at the summoning grounds and finds Milhai waiting with the dog who summoned him. Just then, the dog approaches him to say goodbye, and Milhai explains that everything is set for his return. Afterwards, on the summoning grounds, Milhai gives her farewell speech and tears up while Shinku tries to convince her that they'll have more fun together when he visits again. When he tears up, too, Milhai consoles him, but the summoning portal suddenly activates, so they separate. However, when Shinku begins to levitate, Milhai hurriedly grabs his hands and says she'd like to stay with him forever. Shinku then says he'd love that too, so Milhai declares her love for him, and while he gets ferried out of the world, Shinku says he loves her too. Back on Earth, Becky shows up at Shinku's house and calls him. However, since she got no response, she enters and, on opening the windows, she finds Shinku crying, so she asks him if something happened. Later, while they drink tea, Becky plays the therapist and realizes Shinku thinks he went somewhere for 2 weeks, but has no memory of it. So she searches Google for memory loss from concussions, but Shinku says he didn't hit his head. Becky then asks if he wants to get himself checked at the hospital, but Shinku insists he is fine and suggests they have breakfast and head out. Not long after this, they arrive at Shinku's summer house and are welcomed by Nanami, the girl who won the athletics competition he lost. She then hugs him and Becky. Afterwards, they head inside where Shinku greets his dad and mum. However, despite having fun with his friends and family, Shinku feels empty inside and wonders what he's forgetting. Meanwhile, back on Flonyard, Noir brings more books for Rico and comments on how daunting it was to send Shinku back. Just then, a letter drops out of the books, and when Rico checks it out, she realizes it's about summoning heroes from... Moments later, she runs down a hallway thinking of the letter's contents. The letter had revealed they could summon a hero again if he left mementos with at least 3 people, including his summoner, alongside a promise to return. So Rico arrives at Milhai's room and asks if Shinku gave her anything before leaving. When Milhai confirms this, she reveals that she hasn't unboxed the present yet. So Milhai presents the box and opens it. Just then, they find Shinku's pocket watch and a letter where he promises to return someday. Suddenly, Rico lights up and reveals that they could summon Shinku again. Back on Earth, Shinku spots the dog that once kidnapped him and crouches cluelessly to play with it. Just then, he finds an envelope in its collar, so he opens it and finds the Palladian ring in it. Suddenly, his memories reset, and he freaks out while celebrating with Becky, who has no idea what's going on. When she asks what he's talking about, Shinku says he remembers where he went and tells her he made a lot of friends. After this, he suggests that they go there next summer, and Becky says she would if she's allowed. Just then, Nanami shows up and joins in the fun. Who would you place your money on if Gaul went up against Shinku in a fight? Let's know in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like anime recaps like this.